All right. Thank you. Thank you so much again for joining us for another week of Living a Hot Mom's Life with Sheema. And so remember, if you've been joining me and listening all month, I've been talking about topics related to mental health awareness. All right. Because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so every year I take the time out each week and talk about something in relationship to mental health. And so we've talked about being parents with special needs children. We've also talked about mental health in regards to those who are in the LGBTQ community, and as a parent, with our have the children who are who's LGBTQ community, and what happens to their mental health during their part if they're not accepted and respected by the family. And so we talked about men. We talked about quite a few things. And this week, I told you we're going to be talking about Black women and mental health. And I'm so excited about talking about this week because, obviously I'm a Black woman, right? This topic is near and dear to me, not just on a professional level, but on a personal level. And so I always can't wait to take the opportunity to talk about this topic. But I'm not talking about it with myself this time. So this week I have guests with me. I'm so excited. So that's what you're going to start seeing throughout my new podcast when it's uploaded and episodes are released. I'm going to be talking to a lot more guests and things this year about topics and things that kind of help us along. So if you've never listened to me, I talk about motherhood, the good, bad, the ugly, and everything in between. I don't necessarily talk about changing diapers and temper tantrums, but I talk about some other topics that are real and good relationship to motherhood and what we go through and deal with as moms. So I'm excited. I have some guests on here with me today, and we're just really going to have a chat. So these women are some friends of mine, and all of us have different backgrounds, different experiences with mental health, and whether it's on a personal, professional level. And we're going to just be talking about some things. I have some questions that I'm going to be asking them to talk about, but we're going to have just an organic conversation, and they're going to share their hearts and share what they want to share during our conversation. Okay. And so some are here with me right now, and then we'll have a couple other women, my girls, joining me throughout this time. So ladies, come on, say hello.
Hello.
Hi. So listen. All right, guys. So this is always funny. I got two Shamekas on here. Really, it's two Shamekas. So Shameka Thompson and Shameka Allen-Lane. So it's funny. So we had two Shamekas. So wait a minute, ladies. So how am I gonna know who we're talking to today? How are we gonna do this?
You can call me Meeka.
Okay, we're gonna call Meeka and then Shameka. All right, good. So ladies, to start off this podcast, first of all, thank you for joining me for this topic. It's something near and dear to me, but it's also a topic that's really, really sensitive, really personal, and so I really thank you for joining me just to kind of talk about it and spend some time with me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we're going to start off, you can give the audience a little bit of introduction of who you are. And so Shameka, Meeka, since you're here, go ahead and tell them a little bit about you and who you are.
Okay, well, like Sheema said, my name is Shameka Thompson, and I am a certified intuitive life and self-care coach, as well as a community collaborator and organizer. I am a mom of 2 with 5 bonus children. Woohoo! And I gravitate towards and like to help people with anything I can in terms of improving their quality of life, especially when we talk about energy and spirituality and how to fuse that with, your material, physical life.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Miss Meeka. All right, so Shameka Allen-Lane, tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Shameka Allen-Lane. I am a wife and a mother to a energetic 4-year-old. Most of them are energetic. And I started the company Catalyst Event Coaching, where I do pretty much all things events, but think of me more of a education, events education company, but also managing events. So specializing in those corporate and nonprofit based events.
Awesome. Yeah, she's awesome too. Always have to pick her brain and try to keep her on board with events. She's very knowledgeable information. And then Shameka got to keep me grounded over here with the soaps, with the gyms and stuff in there. She said, I know I don't know a lot about it, but I always gotta ask her, hey, what do I need? What is this? Tell me about the pink one. Well, Sheema, the pink one has a name. Oh, okay. The name of the stone, please. It's so good.
Well, the awesomeness is a Shameka thing, right, Shameka?
Absolutely.
You all are not gonna worry me today with this Shameka thing. No. Where I'm Meeka and Shameka. I'm gonna say intuitive coaching and catalyst coaching. No, I'm gonna call you by your names. Don't even think about it. Okay. So listen, so we're going to be talking, no telling where this conversation is going to go. Of course, I have a direction and have some questions for us, but, as we get to talking, and sharing, who knows what's going to come out of it. And just really share your hearts. I mean, it's just really this podcast, as you can know, dealing with mental health, just in general in the Black community. It's always something that has been taboo for many, many years, something that we just don't talk about, or we just kind of keep on the hush. If someone's going to therapy, we're not like willingly, openly talking about that. So this is a good opportunity for us just to kind of to talk and share, and just hope that when we do share the podcast, which we will be sharing this recording of the podcast starting tomorrow, and you guys will share it too, that it's helpful to somebody. Just letting them know that they can talk about it, they can share, or just kind of striking something in them. So that's what we're doing today. So alrighty, so let me talk about why I came up with the title. So the title of the podcast is "I'm Too Strong to Be Depressed." So let's talk about that. What do you all think about that when I'm talking about that? Black women and mental health. I'm too strong to be depressed. What comes to mind when I say that?
The first thing that comes to my mind is that it's a terrible and crippling stigma that we carry around and defend and don't realize that it's hurting us.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
How about you, Shameka?
Well, yes, that is a topic I feel that haunts us. It's something that we feel we need to live up to. And it's a tall order.
It is. And that's why I put it there is, is I'm too strong to be depressed. And it's so funny because I kept this paper. This is a funny story. I wrote this paper in my undergrad year, many, many years ago, 20 years ago, right? And I kept this paper. It was called the Matriarch. And I was in one of my clinical classes for psychology, and I was talking about the strong Black woman and how she was a matriarch of the family. And we had it was a big paper, about 10 pages long, talking about, the why people saw us as these strong women and what was going on. And so it was hilarious. And then kind of come forward all these years in my going back and doing my degree, my master's from therapy, it came up again. And so I had to research it again. So it was interesting. And I was like, wow, I never thought about the construct in that way, about how that strong Black woman phenomenon, how we feel the need to have to live up to it, how other people hold us accountable to living up to it. And to the point where like you said, it's a tall order, Shameka Allen, you said. And then Meeka, you said, it was crippling. It's crippling humbling. And it is, because Black women, we take onus of that we're strong. Or people always say, well, girl, you can't be depressed. Anxiety, girl, we went through slavery. We're strong Black women. What are you sitting around here crying and whining about? You can't depression, girl, please. Have you ever had those kind of conversations, or heard someone say that to somebody else?
Lord, both. And that was the moment when they had to get out my face.
What? Were you angered, Meeka?
Listen, I was annoyed because, first of all, who are you to negate my feelings?
Yeah.
Like, who are you to tell me how I should and shouldn't feel? Just like that whole, oh, I'm too blessed to be. What?
You gonna be the main one? Yes. No.
Who are you talking to? Not me. You be talking to somebody else. You're not talking to me.
Exactly. Exactly. What were you gonna say, Shameka? I saw you can't take your mute off.
Oh, I was just laughing. I was agreeing.
Because that's the truth, and people say that because that negates what you're going through and what you're experiencing, and what a person, and then it kind of holds you to this standard. It makes you not feel as if you can go get help or ask for help from even your family members or your community. Better yet, a professional. Just when someone says, you're strong, you shouldn't be acting weak. Oh, so are you saying having a mental health issue, being depressed, or having anxiety is a sign of weakness? I'm not sure. What are we saying exactly?
That part.
So, like, what were your ladies like your first experience? I know we're well versed on it now, like mental health and mental illness, mental wellness, self-care, and all this kind of stuff. But what was your first experience with what you now would consider mental health? Not just with yourself personally, but even just out in the world, or your family, or whatever. What was your kind of first experience as a Black girl or Black woman with mental health? If you can remember.
I didn't realize it at the time, but my first experience with it was my own. I want to say once I got into about middle school and all the way up through high school, like I suffered with depression. And nobody was calling it that though. It was me just being a defiant teenager, feeling entitled, being spoiled, wanting things my way. There was a lot of different faces that people gave it instead of calling it what it was.
Wow.
And therefore, I never really got the kind of guidance that I needed to maneuver through that. But somehow, I think I delved into emotional intelligence books and different things. Like I was so annoyed by everybody else's response to it that I just started instinctively doing my own research.
Okay, good. So that's within, and we have one of our other girlfriends joining us. How about you, Shameka? So what was your first experience, with mental health? Just in what maybe you knew it was that or not?
I think from actual mental health, it took a little while before I had an experience that I recognized it along those lines. I mean, there's always people in the neighborhood or something like that need some help. But outside of that, I never really recognized it at a young age as something that we just need to take time for. So I would say the closest to it would be the episode from Saved by the Bell, where Jessie was actually, stressed out. She had put so much on herself. She was trying to be everything anybody expected her to be, class president in, the band, all kind of things. And finally she was having that meltdown and they were like, Jessie, are you okay? And she needed to go get help. So I would say that was probably my first introduction. I was young when I think about that, but that was probably my first time really seeing like, wait a minute, she should have probably did something. I'm glad somebody noticed.
Right. Okay, good. And let me see. So, and I'm gonna say this real quick, and then I'm gonna let our other two girlfriends talk and say who they are. So I think that my first experience was with I was a little girl. Now I don't think I really knew this for what it was, but I'll tell you what we called it. We called it crazy, right? You just called it crazy. And so in my neighborhood, and I grew up in Muskegon, and so I was still living there. So I had to be at least 5 or 6, maybe, because I was in my in the home that we grew up in as little girls, and so I had to be like probably 5 or 6. But we had this lady around the neighborhood, and she would always walk around the neighborhood, and she had her hair was always braided in long plaits and everything, and she would walk around the neighborhood, and she would walk on the side of the streets. Like, she would never walk on the sidewalk or anything. She always walked on the outside, right on the side of the street next to the curb. And she would, and we called her, and this is what everybody called her. So as little kids, you don't know any different, right? We called her crazy lady Audrey, old lady Audrey, right? And so, and she would always walk through, and then she would pull down her pants and she would pee. Right there, exactly, right there. Shameka, don't be laughing, in the neighborhood. And
you
so,
sure that was where you was living at? Because we had one too.
You so mean. Yes. And so, I was 5.
One in every neighborhood.
And that's
that part.
Right. And I mean, of course I'm 5, so I'm not thinking about that as, oh, she's mentally ill or whatever, and something's going on with her. It was just like, I was a little kid, so we probably would laugh like, oh my God, she's peeing, outside, she's going to get in trouble, kind of thing. So that was kind of like my first experience really, with mental health. And then, and going back and say, oh man, that was Miss Old Lady Audrey was sick. That what was going on. So, all right. So, hey there, Miss Joy and Dr. Maxine Ruddock. Thanks for joining us tonight. How are you ladies doing?
Hey, Sheema. This is Dr. Max. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm good. I'm here.
We're gonna have somebody have to have us on there to keep us straight in case we start talking. We don't know what we're talking about here about mental health. So we gotta have an expert on here. And Joy, thanks for joining us. I heard you back there. You here, girl? You here? You here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, welcome. No, thank you. And we just started. We were just talking about our first experiences with mental health, whether we knew it was mental health or not. And before we started talking about the topic of the podcast was how I'm too strong to be depressed. And we just talked about really briefly that statement, how we felt about that statement, as a Black woman. I'm too strong to be depressed, and you can chime in if you want to, but first, just want Dr. Max, if you could kind of introduce yourself really quick and tell the audience who you are.
All right. So I'm Dr. Maxine Ruddock. Love to be called Dr. Max. I'm trained as a clinical psychologist. And I'm also the owner of a local practice called Comprehensive Psych and Assessment Services, where we provide mental health care to the local community. But my zone of genius is working as a coach, helping executive level women to create balanced lives and to actually live the life that they dream of. So I'm very much into women's issues and also into ensuring that women actually step up and live the life that they love. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Max. All right. And so, Joy, tell us who you are really quickly, my dear.
Oh Lord, I know I have to speak. Hold on, let me go another room.
You didn't want to speak. What you gonna do?
Nothing. I was just sitting there listening to y'all talk.
You gonna listen to us talk?
I had the TV out. Yeah, I was just listening to y'all talk.
Oh, so good. So Dr. Max, what do you think when you hear that statement? as Black women in mental health, when someone says, Black women are too strong to be depressed, what do you think about that statement?
Well, before I answer that, I just wanted to make a quick comment on the story that you shared about the woman that you saw growing up.
Yeah.
I actually have a story similar to that, which I believe one of the other young ladies said, was that your neighborhood? Because I had one in mine. But this was a man.
Yeah.
And I remember the kids would be throwing rocks at him because, his kids were so kind.
Yeah.
And then, I just remember kind of watching him and trying to understand what was going on, and then finding out that this young man was a brilliant man who actually had a mental break while he was in med school.
Wow.
And, I got that story a little bit later. I probably was about 6 or so years old. And then I found out he was my cousin.
Your cousin?
Yes.
Wow.
So what that did was that kind of fostered a fascination, I suppose, with mental health. Because one, not only was I fascinated, but I was also afraid. Because I thought to myself, could that be me? Could that happen to me? And I didn't even understand anything about genetics. You just were like, oh, well, if we're cousins, could something like that happen? So it was just funny when you were talking about that story. I smiled to myself because that really was like the impetus for me going into mental health, was realizing that the person in the town that was behaving in that manner was actually someone related to me.
Yes.
But when you talk about Black women being too strong to have mental health issues, there's so many things that tends to feed into us feeling that way. We actually, if you were to think about it from the genre of a generational thing, we traditionally as a people, and traditionally as Black women, we didn't have the luxury of feeling depressed. So, you could not show that negative feeling. You couldn't show, where were you going to go if you were, for generations, occurred according to the way we are. If you think about the cultural aspect of it, where were you as a Black woman going to go saying that you're depressed in this country for the generations behind?
Exactly.
And so now there's a generational thing that has come down to us that actually tells us, while other people have that luxury, you don't have that luxury. That's a luxury for other people. That's not for us.
Wow.
So, that's one of the big things I think about, that I then have to turn to Black women and say, no. They sold you a cup of BS.
Yes, exactly. Because that's what started that saying, just throughout, not just for us, but throughout our community, saying, oh, Black people don't get therapy. That's a white person thing. White people do therapy. Black people don't do therapy. And it's like, who told you that? Yes, we do. Or to the point where you felt that, like you were saying, Dr. Max, who am I going to go to if I go to them and say this? What's going to happen to me sometimes? Sometimes what happens to me if I say that I'm mentally ill, I'm depressed, or I'm hearing voices or seeing things. For me, being a Black woman and having a job and having children, that can be a whole different snowball that no one else has to, deal with in their life. What, right? All of a sudden we're not capable of taking care of our children, or we're a problem with having our job because you may do something quote unquote crazy, being a Black woman who is mentally ill, when everybody else, it's okay to be mentally ill, to have an issue. So you're right. That's interesting. So I'm telling you. So I what else I was going to ask? Oh, what is your, so and kind of piggybacking and kind of going into it as a community, what do you think now? I know we have lots of commercials out. We have, things on TV. We have famous people coming out and they're sharing their stories, and we're talking more. We're doing things like we're doing right here, something that people probably will have never did and share their stories. But what do you get still in general overall, the perspective of mental health in the Black community? Do you obviously we're better off, but where do you kind of gauge and think that we are? And anybody can chime in and start with that question, that answer, if you want to. Like overall, even just in general, with our children, our men and women, how do you think our community is doing?
I would say that we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
We still have a long way to go. We are entering times where I feel that it's not as taboo. Like people are willing to admit that they go through therapy and they're okay with saying it publicly or to other people that they go through therapy. I think there's definitely been a stigma behind it, that something's wrong with you or you can't figure it out if you need to resort to therapy. But sometimes you just need help. And there are other cultures and people that they are consistently in therapy. That's like a tool for them ongoing. And we just need to do better about trying to feel better.
I agree. Trying to feel better. Because, it's hard. It's easy to talk about it, but it's hard for people to kind of see mental health as a part of your health. It's easy to say, go ahead, Dr. Max, you chime in there. It's easy to say you got high blood pressure and get a medication or go to the doctor for the high blood pressure. But when you say you have something going on, depression or anxiety, or I'm feeling kind of weird in my head, you can't go to the doctor to get help for that.
It's funny, Sheema. We in the Black community have historically looked at any kind of healthcare with a certain level of suspicion because of its history with our people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things that kind of prevents us from even seeking the necessary help.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I have found, that even though we are getting better, but I cannot tell you the number of times someone has walked into my office, someone who's Black, and said, thank God. Because there's a certain level that I don't want to have to explain to someone else. And so we do, one of the other things that's kind of preventing many people of color from seeking help is they don't know that therapist. They can't find that therapist that is also of color, so that they can feel comfortable in the process. In an area where vulnerability has traditionally been dangerous for us, to come out and be vulnerable in a mental health state, they want to be vulnerable in a space where they feel safe. And so that's one of the things that I've heard. But then you also think about it through a financial lens. And, for them, for people of color a lot, therapy sounds like a luxury. Right? This is not something I'm going to be doing right now. I got to take care of this. I got to take care of that. I got to take care of this. I'm just going to talk to my girl. I'm going to go to my pastor. I'm going to go to whatever. That's not for me right now. So we, for those of us who are in the community providing services, we are going out and trying to do some education in terms of, listen, if you have a mind, then mental health is something you need to be worrying about, because, speaking the language is important for people to be able to say, let's not just say you're stressed out. There is that ordinary stress that can morph into what we then call depression or anxiety. So going in and educating people and just saying it is not normal for you to get up and cry every day. That burden that you're carrying every day is not for you. So, there's a part of also going out and just educating people, making services accessible, and then making services affordable, and providing with people who look like the people who are seeking the services.
And that's good. And it's funny you say that, because it is interesting, when you talk about it, that I was thinking about several things you were talking about, but when you were talking about the fact that it's a luxury, that we feel it's a luxury, that we can't go that, or somehow we don't deserve it. It's one of those barriers, deserve to do it, or we just have to do other things, and we'll get to that later. The vulnerability of it. But I like how you say, I know what it was I was thinking. When you were talking about stress and you were kind of identifying some of the things that are not normal for you to do every day. But it's so funny when people think about mental health, they think about the fact that the big thing, right? They think about, oh, paranoid schizophrenia, oh, the killer person on TV that shot up the building and because they were mentally ill, or the person who did this to their children because they were mentally ill. So I feel that sometimes it makes mental illness look like this big, just you're quote unquote crazy and you're going to kill somebody thing. And so you don't see it as what you were saying, Dr. Max, that the being stressed and you crying every day. Somehow, sometimes people don't, and especially us in our community, we may not necessarily see that as mental health, mental illness. We'll say, oh, the kids, oh, he's just bad. He needs his butt whooped. Ain't nothing wrong with him, or she's just fast running around here. There's nothing wrong with her. So it's interesting you say that, and that people, they don't want to have that vulnerability of being like something, it's maybe something small, not big. And so Miss Shameka Thompson, Meeka over there, talking to
here
real quickly. So what do you think? I mean, because you're kind of out there, you're in the realm when you're talking about, the intuitive coaching. Talking to people in a different manner. What are you kind of seeing with people, even when you're working with them on that level in the Black community?
Well, I mean, first, let me start by saying I agree both with Shameka and with Dr. Max about the fact that, we've made some progress, but we definitely still have a long way to go. And in more of the intuitive or spiritual energetic sphere, you got to be real careful, because some people will misunderstand some of their experiences, their mental experiences, as spiritual ones, and will not get the help that they actually need. So on my end, when I'm coaching people, I really have to pay close attention to, what they're saying, what they're doing, and what kind of energy they're putting out, because sometimes they can't tell the difference between a spiritual experience or an energetic shift and something that's not quite right on the mental plane, and having to redirect them or refer them to a professional like Dr. Max. You know what I'm saying? Because with that fear that we have as a culture, about mental health, not being able to find mental health professionals that look and sound and share experiences the same as ours, that becomes another form of hiding. The spiritual, hiding behind the spiritual stuff becomes another form of hiding mental health or poor mental health.
That's good. That's good. And thank you for sharing that, Shameka. Meeka, we have two Shamekas on here, Shameka Allen-Lane and Shameka Thompson. So we're on Shameka and Meeka terms, so we all know who we're talking about. This is good, and there's so many things you can talk about with this, with mental health and Black women. And do you all find that as women and Black women that you can share, and that we can share this experience? Like if we're having some concerns with our mental health, we're feeling a certain way, do you feel you can share that with your girlfriend, or do you think we're still kind of embarrassed to kind of share that within our even our close connections, family and friends?
Definitely some levels of apprehension there, especially depending on who you're dealing with. Okay. Such things, such as like trauma bonding. Like I will admit that if somebody has a lot of stuff going on and mentally, they're not healthy and they're not receptive to receiving help, I'm kind of like, what you're not about to do is latch on to me.
You listen, you're like, wait a minute. This is becoming a dump session.
Right. Like, I'm not helping you. You're not helping me. You just call in and just, retelling the narrative that you're living in, or you're talking to me, but you're not telling the truth. You know, and so I myself, I will admit, I am very apprehensive. Like, I try not to judge people, but I'm just like, you know, certain red flags go up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not talking to you about anything I got going on.
Careful. Yeah, careful. We have those boundaries. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
And that's good to have. How about you, Shameka? You think that, you know, the women, have you experienced that, noticing, you know, women sharing that with amongst, you know, each other?
It's getting better. I think it's getting better. I personally have shared some of my own feelings with some people, but I would say they were part of my close circle. You know, similar to what Shameka was saying, you know, you have to kind of watch who you share, just like with anything that you share, you want to kind of watch and make sure it's someone that will hold the information, you know, with integrity. But I have seen people doing it a little bit more. Everybody doesn't share. Sometimes you just want to kind of keep certain things to yourself. You know, we're from a community that there's a lot of different types of trauma that, you know, people just keep. You know, there are stories to this day that when I talk to my dad, he'll say, I'll tell you guys about that one day. I'm grown. So I don't know when one day
listen,
happen. But I recently have been able to pull some of those stories from him, and I get it. But I think that same thing, holding those bits and pieces of information and never sharing it, even if it's not with a professional, I think it does tear us apart.
The not sharing it, almost like this, the secrecy kind of.
Exactly. It tells you apart when you have that secret that you feel like you can't share, and you just don't want to tell anybody. But there's something freeing about when you can start telling someone. It may feel like it's painful when you're releasing it, but as you release that, there's something powerful in that.
Yes, that's right. So, Dr. Max, what's been your experience with that? I know that you work with a lot of professional, maybe high level, you know, women. You know, what have your experiences been on that level? You know, with getting them to share, or even if they feel they can talk to anybody about it.
Well, you know, I'm going to tell you that sense of safety and the ability to create a relationship, once that's in place, that woman is going to share. Yeah. And I love the way both of the Shamekas, or is it Shameka and Meeka? I love it. We're both talking about in terms of the family secrets. You know, for many of us as Black people, Black women, you don't tell your business. You don't tell the family business. You make sure you're brought up with that sense of, you make sure that those people don't know what's going on. You go out there. If they ask you, you say fine, but you don't go out and you don't tell anybody the business. Yeah. And I think that we actually bring that forth in our adult lives, where it's like that inner unconscious voice. When someone asks you, you don't tell the business. You say fine. Everything is good. And so that has not served us. I mean, it served to keep us safe. Yes. When we were younger, but it has not served. It's actually kept us imprisoned in our own pain. And so what I have found is that if you provide a safe space for that woman, right? Because, you know, just a quick segue, a lot of women come to me and say, I don't trust other women. So I'm not telling other women my business because they're like my rivals. So then there's that component that goes in too. So even within the circle, there's still a certain, unless it's a real deep, close friendship, there's always a certain level of guardedness against that bonding or that opening or being vulnerable enough in front of someone. But what I have found is that if you provide that safe space for that woman, if she is able to feel like you can trust, and that trust must be earned, right? Because a lot of us are coming from, okay, now I'm gonna have to tell you my business. Don't be telling my business in the streets when I finish telling it to you. So
that's right. Like, listen, don't tell this to nobody else. Now, I know I'm at, but I'm gonna tell you this.
But once you provide that safe space,
Yeah.
Black women share like anybody else. They will break down, they will tell you, and it's amazing to see that sense of connection that will happen in that safe space where she can be, she can tell, and she can be held. So, that's one of the things I fight to create, because we don't often find that space where we feel that way.
You're right. You're right. That's true. Because, like you were saying, that connection, I hate it when you have this thing on your head, the angry Black woman, talking about the angry Black woman, and it's almost kind of tying the thing with the strong Black woman. You kind of group it all together and make us look like these women who are just hardened, who have no compassion, and who we don't share. We don't have the moment of vulnerability or being sensitive, and having those desires for connection. And it's like, what? Where did this come from? How dare you misrepresent me in this way? The group of women, as the Black woman, a group of women who have held things on our shoulders, for others, who says that we are not compassionate and connected and cry and feel to the point where you think you can still, mistreat and hurt us. So it's interesting, and with that, where I love what you said, Dr. Max. You said imprisoned in our own pain. Wow. Wow. That's deep, because for so many of us as Black women, we find ourselves there imprisoned in our own pain because of our inability to make that connection, or the feeling that not having that safe space, and things of that nature. So, wow, that is kind of one of those things that kind of stuck with me when you were talking, imprisoned in our own pain. I'm probably going to quote you somewhere on that. I'm just giving you a heads up. That was like, wow. It just summed it up, so great, with that. And, wow. And, okay. So I don't want to go I was going to go way there, but let's see. Someone said trauma. And I just want to go there just a little bit with trauma, because I think sometimes in the Black community, we're dealing with or have dealt with so much trauma, sometimes, whether it's as a child, whether as an adolescent, an adult, or just currently right now, we're dealing with so much trauma. And I think that sometimes we don't realize how the things and the trauma we've experienced and dealt with, how that has actually impacted and affected our mental health. And Dr. Max, just can you just kind of start off with us a little bit on that statement, and just talking about a little bit of trauma, and kind of, do we see that, or should we see that as a part of our mental health too?
In terms of trauma that we experience?
Yes.
Well, absolutely. That is one, stress is one of the main factors that ends up resulting in a mental health diagnosis. And that stress tends to be associated with trauma. When you think about who we are as Black people, and the trauma of seeing those who look like us being constantly killed or persecuted,
yes.
Constantly feeling like we don't have a true voice in a society that's at large, feeling almost like it's consistently, like for me, when I talk to Black women, I always say to them, sometimes being in this culture feels like you're in a domestic violence situation. Ooh, right? Wow. So it's like you're constantly being abused, You speak up, you're told not to speak up. We go into the honeymoon phase. You give me a little bit of stuff, but then after that, you're black in my eye, you're beating my butt, right? So it just feels like there's that constant trauma being pushed against us. If a pandemic comes and it's hitting the situation, the population at large, then we find out it's hitting us more than everybody else.
Yeah.
So there's just that constant trauma happening for us. And what a lot of people are calling stress, anger, really is a traumatic reaction. Because we're consistently being traumatized by this society.
I totally agree with you. And just experience, like you were saying, just even during the pandemic, and I just felt sometimes myself being traumatized. And I'm just going to say this, and you guys can chime in, Meeka and Shameka, Joy, Dr. Max. And when, like you were saying, the experience and watching people get killed, whether it's a George Floyd or it was another story, it was a different story and something else is happening. And I felt, like I was being traumatized, with the things that were going on, and even things with the pandemic, whether it's the loss of employment, the deaths that were happening in the community because of COVID-19 and things of that nature. It was just experience to the point. I got to the point, honestly, me personally, where I like shut down on social media for a minute. I just had enough, of just traumatizing myself by flicking on my phone and having to watch another video just popping up in my feed or reading the comments or some other kind of political fight, amongst people on Facebook, in Facebook groups or pages. I said, you know what? I'm taking a break. What's up, Shameka Allen? I see you unmuted yourself.
No, I agree. I definitely think the pandemic has brought on trauma in different ways for people. And the thing to realize is that your trauma is your own. So it doesn't have to be what somebody else assumes is a very traumatic situation. It's about that person and their perception of that situation. But I will say something I often refer to for people is that I no longer watch the news. And for me, when I was pregnant, there was a lot going on that summer. That was the summer of Post here in Orlando. That was the summer that Philando Castile, like there was every month, probably even a shorter time span than that, there was something major hitting, like before you could just kind of get yourself together and get your thoughts together, something else was happening. And I went to work and had a meltdown. I've never done that before, but I had a meltdown at work where I just was like, how can I bring a little Black boy in this world when I can do everything I can to try to teach him how to do the right things, but I still may not be able to protect him as his parent. And that just, it took me down. And then that's when I had a moment of realizing, to protect me and my pregnancy, the news goes off. It doesn't mean that I need to completely disconnect from the world. Maybe I listen to the radio here or there, or maybe I read articles when I decide I want to take in that content. But I was no longer watching the news, and I still really don't until there's maybe a natural disaster coming. I'm trying to check for weather purposes, but I still don't. I realized it was so much better for my mental health to not take that in consistently, because it's more of a negative narrative more often than not than positive. And that's not something that I wanted to be constantly reminded of. So that was something I did for protection for my baby and my pregnancy.
Oh man, things you do. Yes, that's right. Anything you wanted to say, Meeka, on trauma?
I feel the exact same way Shameka did. I had, and you too, like I had to stop. I think I uninstalled all social media from my phone for like a month because I just couldn't deal with it. I didn't want the notifications. I didn't want to be tempted to go in there and then happen to see this stuff again. And then with my children being, older, I had my own stress around, I have to have this conversation with them now.
Yeah.
My little one, he just turned 7, and people in school are talking about it and all of these different things, and all of a sudden people are asking him how he's feeling and how's your mom. And I'm like, I had to have conversations with my children that I wasn't prepared to have with them yet. And that was its own kind of trauma, because when you're dealing with a young child, they ask you why. Well, why, mommy? Why? And every answer you give them is never satisfying. And it's just, all you can say is, baby, that this is the world that we live in, and this is the things that you're going to face. This is the things that we face. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for a while, like, even when things started to lift a little, I didn't want to go outside. Yeah. I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want my kids to go outside. I just wanted to hide in my house.
Wow. And I can agree with you saying, talking with the older kids. I mean, just the thoughts sometimes, and the conversation that I had to have. I had one son who was driving, who wants to go out and go here and do this. And it's like, well, make sure you do this. And oh no, you can't wear that hoodie, and why, take that hoodie off your head. Don't wear that hoodie. And it was just to the point where, and then even with them, wanted to check in with them and how they were feeling. Like, do you feel anxious? How do you feel about these things that are happening to Black men in that year? Because they're on social media, they're old enough, right? They're 19 and 16. So they're on TikTok and they have Instagram. And sometimes they may see things before I see it. And then, if you ever been on TikTok, I mean, TikTok has a world of people talking about everything that's happening, but from whatever their perception or perspective is, right? And so now you're looking to yourself like, whoa, where'd you hear that? Let's talk about that, because is this the correct information you're getting? Are you being anxious and feeling, depressed off of information that's maybe not even true? And so, so that was very, interesting too. And just having to have that conversation, and them dealing with their feelings, and also dealing with my feelings as a mom, like you were saying, Shameka, how to keep them safe. I'm thinking to myself, he's driving, he's out here, it's nighttime. What's happening? Why do you want to go here and all this good stuff? So, trauma, is something else. And I was talking to somebody about trauma, because I was talking to them, and it was a guy, and in one of my classes, and we were talking about trauma, but we were talking about it from the perspective of Black men, right? And talking about how sometimes in their neighborhoods, where if they grew up in neighborhoods where maybe it was a lot of maybe crime going on, maybe shooting, drugs, fighting, and they were talking about how many people that they had saw maybe or knew personally that had been murdered or shot at and things of that nature. And it was funny in talking to him about it being trauma. This trauma you're experiencing, and it was like a weird thing, like, that's not trauma. Well, sort of, kind of, yeah, it is, trauma, having to deal with those things as a teenager, seeing someone get shot, seeing someone die, and to the point where you're immune to it. And so it's just interesting. And that's why I kind of talked about the trauma, with that too, because I think sometimes we endure and go through certain traumas as Black women in the Black community, that sometimes we don't acknowledge the impact and the effect that it's had on us. And when, like Dr. Max was talking about, the level of stress sometimes that comes and builds out of these traumatic experiences, and that we don't understand the impact and effect that it's having on our mental psyche, not just your physical psyche of your high blood pressure, right? But your mental psyche, what it's doing to that. and that's mental health. So that's why it's so important when we start talking about mental wellness and getting professional help and not just going to the church, and not just thinking you can talk to your other girlfriend or your guy friend about it, but knowing when to recognize when it's time to get help. And so I'm back at you, Dr. Max. What are some little things sometimes, not the big thing, I'm taking on my clothes and I'm running down the street kind of thing. I want to go shoot up somebody, but sometimes for people, what are some of the things, the smaller things that you can say and realize or start to notice about yourself, some things that are happening where you should tell yourself, I think I need to go talk to somebody. It's probably time. When does someone decide that for themselves?
Well, one of the things that I try to tell people is if you're waking up every day for most days and your emotions are at the extreme of what you're normally feeling, it's time. And so that allows it to be very personal, right? So I'm not picking out any one thing so that person can say, well, I don't feel that. Yeah. What I'm saying is when you think about it, if you are normally easily, let's say you're impatient, right? Because there's no judgment. Mm-hmm. But then you find out that the impatience for you is on a Mach 10. Then that's to the extreme, right? Yeah. Why am I so angry now all the time? I mean, I know I've been impatient, but this is ridiculous. Yeah. It's time. Right. So let's say you're someone who's been pretty low energy. I'm sad, but now you're sad all the time, every day, all day. When it starts to get to that, that's the time to get some help. So once you can recognize for yourself, because the understanding is when that imbalance has come. So whatever it is that you're feeling, once that has taken you outside of the scope of what's normal for you, it's time to go and get help.
Time to go and get help. That's good. And that's so good, Dr. Max, because like you were saying, it's so easy when you said, if you say that one thing and then someone can say, well, I'm not feeling that, so I'm good. I must be good. Well, I'm not doing that, so I'm good. But I love the way you put that. If it's outside of the normal impatience, the normal anger that you have, that's really, really, really good. And so what do you ladies? Hey, Miss Joy, you were going to say something?
No, I was just thinking about what she was just saying. Mm-hmm. And again, too, I think you have to, like if you live with people, with your family, when they start mentioning things, because sometimes when we're in the midst of it, we can't see it. Oh, especially like you said, if we're one of them strong Black women that just, I'm okay. I've got to make it happen. I got to make it. I got to do it. I got to, do whatever I got to do to make it work. Mm-hmm. So when you're in the midst of it, sometimes you don't see it. You just in your mindset, I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. When you have that one person, whether it's your husband, your wife, children, that's saying, okay, wait a minute now, you need to slow down because what's wrong? Like something ain't right. Mm-hmm. And because they can notice it too before you do as a person.
They do,
because you've been the person that's trying to make it and do everything for so long
that you can't see it. And that's right. That's a great point you bring up, Joy, because it is so important. And even though as hard as it may be, sometimes for you to hear it,
mm-hmm. For you to sometimes you don't want to accept it,
because people don't want to always hear. It's like, listen, you a little out of pocket. What's going on? You're a little more frustrated than you usually are. Like you're a little more turned up. You haven't got out the bed in a couple of days. What's going on? So that is definitely a good point. When someone's saying those things, to really try to look introspective and say, man, maybe he's right. Maybe, she's right. Things are going on. So, and we can talk about this all night, right? Because, and it's probably shouldn't be the last time that we talk about this, because I think, and I know, to be honest with you, I know that these kind of conversations, need to be had. People need to see other women, just talking about it sometimes, and just starting to build up that connection and just knowing that you can talk about it, even if you have to limit and decide on how much you're going to give, how much you're going to talk about it, just knowing that you can talk about it sometimes really helps. So getting down to the closing of it, if you ladies can share at least one or two strategies of some things you do to make you feel better, to lower your stress level, or to cope. Sometimes when you feel life is overwhelming for you. What are some a tip or a strategy you could give to the audience, and what they can do? Some things that work for you.
I know something real simple is tune back in to your breathing. Something as simple as intentional conscious breathing can help you to just it can help you to recenter, it can help calm your feelings down. And it's a simple act. You can do it anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't need help with it. It's something that we need to do anyway. It's going to happen automatically, but just to sit there and count your breaths. Count, an inhale and exhale is one breath, and when you get to 10, you start back at 1.
Just take some moment.
Just breathe. Just breathe.
That's awesome.
The buildup of oxygen in the blood is a natural kind of sedative. So just breathe, because when we get upset, when we get stressed out, overwhelmed, the first thing we do is we start breathing shallow. And with the reduction in oxygen, our body starts to react. We can't think clearly. All kinds of things start to happen.
That's good.
So just breathe. Good. Just breathe.
I like that. Just breathe. It's funny you say that, because I bought this. I have an Apple Watch, right? And it's this thing on here. I don't know if I activated it or whatever, but it comes on here every now and then. It's a little notification, and it says, "It's time for you to breathe." Yes, what? And so it's interesting you say that, and it actually takes you through a breathing exercise. If you say start exercise, it actually takes you through that. So breathing. All right, Shameka Allen, what strategy do you have that you use to just relax or something?
I feel like it's in line with what Shameka mentioned. I think kind of taking things in with nature, like maybe going outside if you can't go outside, but just have that moment where you're taking in the surroundings. And then on the other side, if you find that you are in a very sensory situation, then actually zoning out.
Zoning out, like in a more meditative.
Correct. Being able to just be, just you're the only person. It's just you, and you can do what Shameka was saying, like concentrate on breathing or find something else, but zoning out. But I do feel like nature is a really good way to kind of like rebalance and calibrate yourself. And you could just be out for a walk, or just go outside and stand or sit, and you just look at the birds, look at the wind. You can look and take in whatever else, and it just kind of resets you.
That does it for you. Okay. And I'll share one of mine. I'm just to be honest with you, something very simple that we take for granted. I sleep. I will listen. I've learned, and I listen to my body, and when it is to the point, and I usually, if you're kind of a busy person, you kind of always used to kind of moving and shaking and doing your thing or whatever, and your body says it's time to sleep. You're like, please, body, I will sleep later. That has been like really golden for me, I tell you, over the past year or so, just to come home, and when I'm feeling that sense of I'm just exhausted, I'm tired, I actually listen. I lay down and I take a brief nap, just period, just to sleep, or try to make myself sleep in. So, that kind of does it for me. Then I'm like, and it's like, whew, okay, now it's ready to go. Now I can refocus. But I think sometimes that sleep deprivation, it just kind of does something to you, especially when you're a busy person. You're constantly running around. You got the kids. You got your business. You have your marriage. You got all kinds of going on, and sometimes sleep is sometimes the last thing on our agenda. Right? We'll just sleep when we get to bed at night. We'll get there. But that's kind of one of those things that I'm starting to do. And I'm usually you would have hear me say throughout my life, oh, I cannot sleep during the daytime. Oh, I can't do that. I don't do that. That is so untrue for myself in the last year or so. So, Dr. Max, any strategy you want to share?
I was listening to all these wonderful strategies. I was like, I'm taking notes of, sleep is such a restorative thing that we can do. So I'm glad that you're using that, Sheema. One of the things that I do is I stop and I get still. And then I kind of scan my environment. If whatever it is creating stress for me is physical and I'm able to, I'm going to simply remove myself from it. Right. So I'm not going to continuously engage in a stressful situation. And if I can't do it, because, again, like you say, we are women who are running businesses, we're doing things like that. So we don't always have the luxury of getting away from something physically. And even again, like when you, Shameka and Meeka were saying, and I just shut off social media. If you recognize that that's a point of stress for you, if that's something, because remember, some of the stress that is coming in, we open the door. So we have to stop and monitor the situation and to see if this is something that we can actually shut and remove ourselves from it. And that's like one of the greatest things that you can do is to simply remove yourself. If you can't do that physically, do it mentally. What the mind visualizes, believe it or not, if you focus on it long enough, the body believes it's real. So even if it's that 5-minute meditation to bring yourself back to a space where you are calm, where you are happy, where you are laughing, where you are joyful, where you felt like the world was your oyster, bring yourself back to that for 5 minutes and stay in that space for a minute. And you will find that your physiological responses, your breathing will go down because you're in that restful space. Your sense of rush and moving is going to slow down because you've gone into that space. My happy space like that is the beach. I can go to the beach any time of the day. Any time of the day, I can close my eyes and and then one of the things I say is engage those senses. Think about listening to what the waves sound like the last time you were on the beach and you can hear the laughter of the people and you felt the sun on your skin and the sand was gritty between your toes. And you will mentally bring yourself to that space and your body will react.
I love that. I love that. Visual of the beach. I'm really taking that one in because I love the beach. So, and it's not about swimming. People say we can't swim. Oh no, honey, going to the beach is not about swimming. For me, Miss Joy, you got anything that you do to kind of just release that stress and just cope when life is just coming at you?
I'm definitely the opposite now, especially if the kids are grown. When they were little, you would try to find all that stuff to do, but now just a good bath to me is like that's it. Just give me my bubble bath, my candles, close the door, I'm good. Cut on my gospel music. That's your relaxation time.
Yes. Learn to take that time to just relax.
Where I put my gospel on and all them old school songs be coming on, and sometimes whatever it is I was going to have to sit there, cry in the tub and cry. Or whatever you have to do, you need that time to yourself and just to relax and just focus on you. Because if you don't focus on you and take care of you, you definitely can't help nobody else.
Yes. You can't.
But I love a good bath. Go out, sit in the tub till my skin be wrinkled, the water got cold. I was sitting there for
the little kid is out in the pool. Boy, get out that pool.
Right?
It's time to get out the pool.
No, I'm not ready. I'm not even ready. I get out and my skin got steam coming off of it because I didn't sit there for so long.
Oh, that's
I don't care though, because that's my time. I know that's when them stressful days come. Sometimes a shower just ain't it. I need to sit in some water and just with the bubbles. I get my eucalyptus and my other stuff, my oils, and put in that water. And just relax. Ain't nothing like it.
I love it. Thank you, Joy. And you got ladies, thank you so much. And in closing, is there anything that you all want to say to anybody who's listening here? Because there may be people who are listening and they may be going through some of these things we've been talking about. The stress, the trauma, the secrecy and just maybe experiencing a lot of things because of the pandemic. Is there anything that you all just would like to just share in closing, with any of the women listen or the men too?
I say you got to trust your body too. Believe your body when it's telling you different things. Stop thinking, oh, it ain't nothing. Oh, I'm okay. No, if you're not, you're not. And I think that's some of the problem. We as, like I said, women, we just let things go because we can't see ourselves as weak. If we go to the doctor, or weak if we tell somebody, I'm not right, no, that's not being weak. That's knowing your body and knowing yourself. And when your body is telling you, like you said, go to sleep. Go to sleep. Your body telling you to sit down, you got to sit down. Because at the end of the day, whether you at a job or wherever, if something happened to you, they going to go on. That business still going to continue on without you. They're going to hire somebody else in your place and move on.
That's right.
So you can't let the things of the world be your focus. You have to make sure that you're your focus.
Don't be afraid to focus on yourself and trust. And I hear you saying too, trust yourself.
Trust yourself. Yep.
Thank you, Joy. Anybody who wants to go next? Anybody else want to share some last words with the women out here?
Oh, you want to go ahead, Shameka?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say that as hard as it is, we gotta stop being afraid of the truth. Whatever the truth is about our situation, about how we feeling, what happened to us, what we're afraid of, what somebody did to us, things that we may have done to ourselves. We gotta be willing to embrace the truth because there's healing when we come to accept and be honest about what's actually going on with us.
Oh, that's very good. Woo. Accept the truth. Acknowledge it. Be true. Go ahead, Miss Shameka Allen-Lane.
I would say, Dr. Max mentioned earlier about knowing what you normally do if you find that you are maybe now more impatient or these other tendencies. But along with that, I would say actually look out for those long period of time where you know that you may be entering a stressful situation or you're currently in a stressful situation, but you think that you're managing through the situation. But if it is a long time frame that this is going on for, or you realize you have to make a whole bunch of changes, you probably need to do a self-check and check on yourself and make sure you really are okay, because we can tell ourselves very often that we're fine and we're not. So I definitely say check on those. I've been there where I thought I was managing it. Apparently I wasn't. Mm-hmm. So we want to check on those things and not let that go on for too long.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Sheema. Dr. Max, any last words you'd like to give us? The ladies out here?
I do want to talk about pain, right? Mm-hmm. Pain has a purpose. And so, for me, for my last words, I just want to say to people, if you're in physical pain, you don't ignore it. If you're in mental pain, don't ignore it. Mm-hmm. There's a purpose for it. It's telling you that something is wrong. And so if you feel that, just like I wouldn't want you walking around on a broken leg, you wouldn't think it's okay to walk around and ignore that pain because it's telling you something is broken. That mental pain is telling you something is broken. Don't be afraid. It's not normal to do that. Go out there. There is help. There are people who care. You may not believe that, but there are. There are people who will hold you and carry you, help you to walk through that process, to help you to get through that pain. Just don't think that the feeling of the pain is normal. What's not normal is sitting and living with that pain.
Oh, man. I love that, Dr. Max. Yes, well, you've heard it here. You heard it here, ladies. And gents too, because it's go out. So men, you may be listening as well. And there are so many other things that we could talk about, so many topics, and we definitely have not covered even a third or fourth of the complexities and the barriers and the challenges that go into being a Black woman or a Black man or just being a part of the Black community and dealing with mental health, because it's not a new phenomenon, but it's sometimes in a lot of ways it's new for us, the way that we are dealing with it and the way that we're now trying to tackle it and make sure and understand that, like Dr. Max was saying, we can deal with our pain too. And we don't have to carry the burden alone. We don't have to suffer alone anymore. Like we don't have to be in prison, like Dr. Max was saying throughout in the show here. But I just hope that throughout this podcast, if you are dealing with some things, whether it's because of the pandemic or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a reason, a big catastrophe, a big pandemic, for something to be dealing, that you could be dealing with something that you want to get help with. Just know that it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to get help for your mental health. You're not weak. It doesn't make you any less strong if you get help for your mental health. So don't suffer alone. Don't go the road alone because you don't have to. We heard Dr. Max. She's one of the people who are out there, who has the resources and know other people who can connect you with somebody. So you want to connect with her, please get with me and I'll connect you with her. And she can connect us with some other people. But just be mindful and understand, don't buy into that lie that you're too strong to be depressed. That as Black women, you don't need counseling. As Black people, we don't deserve, and don't have a place to go to deal with our trauma and our pain, because we do. So thank you for listening to Living a Hot Mom's Life with Sheema. You've been here listening to all the mental health. And next week, we're going to be talking about Black men and mental health. Very interesting, a very good topic that's very relevant and important as well. So I hope you come back and join us next week when we talk about this, Black men and mental health. And if you have any questions about this podcast, you want to get in contact with anybody who's on here and speak with them, I will put you in connection with them. So thank you. You all have a good night, and we'll see you next week. Talk to you soon.
Night.
Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.